washi in Japan are made. All right, oftentimes they are dried on these big drying irons. They're steam or wood-fired. They're these big stainless steel, or no, these big steel panels.
They're polished metal.
Polished metal.
Either aluminum
Yeah,
or
they're
steel.
vertical. Now, some of these handmade sheets of paper are huge. And after the water's been pressed out of the stack, one at a time, they're either brushed onto drying boards to be brought outside, or they're brushed onto these metal surfaces to dry quickly from heated steam. And this is done with one person. Takes this big, wet, fragile thing, walks over to a wall, and boom, it's done. I use that same pattern for our paper making for those same reasons, but also to apply my paste, because what it does is it controls the paper's smoothing effect. You want to smooth it out without bubbles efficiently and really to, I think, the most ergonomic way. So what I'm going to do first is turn this into a wet sheet of paper. All right, so this piece of paper, let's pretend that we've just made this piece of paper, and it's been pressed, to remove most of the water, so that it's not so fragile that it can't be removed from the post and just gone to put to dry.
It just came out of the vat and was pressed
Okay, so
between felts.
a brush like this, the bristles shouldn't be too long, too short. A nice 4-inch brush is fine for what most of us do. Look what I've got here: a thumb on one side, and then my fingers on the other side. I'm going to pick up one corner of the paper with the brush. I'm right-handed, so this brush is in my right hand. My fingers are on the outside of the brush holding that one corner, and my thumb is here. And notice I've got just my thumb and index finger pressure here. I go, I do this 1,000 times a day. All right? You tack this corner up, and from this corner down diagonally. Now you have 2 right-angle triangles. You go from the center and you hit this corner. Then you do perpendicular to that first center line, you brush it out, coloring in that right-angle triangle. You go from the center up. Your hand is free. Up, 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 up. Now this is very dry. You'll be much wetter. Okay? But, all right, so it's tack, diagonal down to the corner, and then it's like coloring in this right-angle triangle from the center to the edges. From here to the corner, and then same thing, coloring perpendicular to the center line, like this. And it will smooth the whole thing out beautifully without bubbles. If you're applying paste, whether it's on the table, I back coat against the wall. I put dip my brush in the paste, up, down, dip, 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 up, 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 up. The whole area is covered, and it's that fast, and it's easy to control.
If you're doing it all day, it looks like a dance. There's a rhythm.
Yeah. Now, let's say this has methylcellulose on it. And this is a great way to handle large sheets when you're by yourself and you have no one to help you put things together, okay? I would just take another large sheet. I don't have one handy, but, and I'm not going to bother wetting anything, but I would just do the same thing. Let's say I've brushed methylcellulose on there. You pick up your other piece of paper, you go up to it, and you'd be surprised, like what, of course this isn't wet. If it was wet, it would stick. It would just be able to do this, and you're letting gravity work with you. Because this edge is hanging down, you don't have to really worry about what's happening to it so much. And it happens quickly, you can easily control it. And so that's just a great technique if you can, if this video can isolate that as well. That might be helpful to people for working with large sheets when you're by yourself.
So do you think it's, would you always have your surface vertical rather than like laying horizontally for that reason?
I have used it horizontally. As a matter of fact, anytime I'm spreading paste across an area of paper, I always use that pattern. It really distributes the paste evenly and you don't miss any spots. In fact, the geometry of that is just very easy to keep track of. When you're going from here to the middle, out and out, did I get over here? You're doing this radial thing and that's too thick over there and you're like going back and forth. You'd be surprised at how you can fuss and fuss and fuss if you don't have an organized way of brushing your glue around. But if you have this quick geometry, it's almost as quick as signing your name. So,
And
yeah.
when the paper comes out of the vat on the screen is thrown onto the felt and then pressed. This is now the size of your thumb because
Thank you guys for holding
that paper is very, very delicate. It's never been dried. And by picking it up like this, we have that much surface area because it's just a wet mat of fibers. It doesn't have any strength. That's why he's using a wide brush to support the weight.
Yeah.
Nice try. Any questions? Is everybody's paper dry?
It's really humid here. It's going to take a while.
Not very.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you notice, I've had trouble with thicker papers when I'm trying to
Yeah.
laminate thicker papers.
Mhm.
Richard suggested yesterday that maybe one of them actually has a chemical
Size.
sizing in it.
Yep.
It might make it delaminate.
Mm-hmm.
But I always notice it with the thicker papers. And I
Yeah.
thought it happened with handmade papers, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Some kind like a Wonka or something. It's
Yeah,
a heavier.
it's a heavier.
So-
Well, handmade doesn't mean that they don't have size.
Right, that's true. So, have you noticed that certain papers maybe don't adhere well together?
Yeah.
Are there other factors that?
There are factors. The most obvious papers that don't adhere together well are butcher papers, which have some plasticized surface. And there are gift wrap papers that have coatings for smoothness and gloss that are really almost impenetrable by water. Foil, surprisingly, even though it's water resistant, you can paste foil using methylcellulose to paper, and it stays pretty well. But mostly I've seen the plastics, papers that have heavily coated plastic paints, heavily included plastic
Sometimes
release
it's
layers.
wax.
Yeah.
They do all kinds of stuff to paper in the paper mills and the factories to make it stay in the factory less time.
Yeah.
So there might be actually a coating of dust on it to help it keep from sticking. He mentioned butcher paper. A lot of the older butcher paper was actually waxed. It's sprayed with a very light coating of wax, so they can wrap meat and it will stay longer. Nowadays they use another polymer. It's more of a plastic, but in our stacks of handmade paper, we put butcher paper in between because it's cheap and it's big. It's versatile.
But again, getting back to what Beth mentioned about testing things out, that's very important. As many years as I've been doing this, I still run into trouble. I am still surprised by what I thought would go well, wouldn't somehow, may have been unanticipated. But when you're testing things out, you can still make something from it. I have had papers that happened to be delaminated, but the methylcellulose stiffened to the two sheets that separated. And so I pulled them apart and I folded them separately. Lemon and lemonade kind of a thing. So it's almost like a cook, you can eat your mistakes. We origami people, we can fold our mistakes. We fold imperfect papers that we make and say, well, that's too good to throw away and it's nice enough to fold. So don't think you have to throw it away if it didn't work out the way you planned.
But it looked like in process, oops. So that was a 6-foot square. So I'll
Now,
show this around a little bit.
a less common way, and I don't know if anyone else does this,
That's hard to see.
but one of the problems of cobbling together a large piece of paper from smaller pieces is you would probably worry, and it's a good reason to worry, about where these overlapping seams are going to show up on the outside of the origami model. So you take a bunch of rectangles and you overlap them and you make a, some sort of a tiled array, and then you go to fold it up and you wanted this nice rhinoceros or an elephant, and you can see where the overlaps are on the outside. Now, of course, that's a horrible thing to have happen, but what a lot of people don't think about is, why don't you just look at the crease pattern? If you're going to use a lot of small pieces of paper, this is what I do. I look at the base crease pattern, and then I cut my pieces that I'm going to cobble together out of in the shape of the polygons, just larger. And then I make sure to cut tabs that will overlap. And my overlaps, I'm always careful to figure out where in the crease pattern things could just end up being inside, outside. So then you've got, essentially, your polygons of your crease pattern are your small pieces of paper. You've built in your overlaps, and your crease pattern is right there. Then you just go ahead and follow your crease pattern, collapse it up. Yes. You won't have any seams showing on the outside. And you will have very...
Those three important words. It's only paper. Experiment, have fun.
No, isn't it? It's only a paper mold.
No.
Hey guys, I got something else for you to talk about.
Yeah.
Could you talk briefly about making larger paper out of smaller paper by using the same techniques?
Yeah. Beth, do you do that? Do you make larger sheets out of smaller sheets?
I've done a little bit of that. It's essentially using this, you're laminating sheets together and kind of overlapping them, making sure the seams are kind of staggered. And if it's thinner paper, kind of like deckle the edge, so it's, if you know it.
Because I know when
edge,
Bernie
so
was here, he talked about making some 12-foot paper for
Yeah.
a bear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you can essentially make a larger sheet. Let's say you wanted to do, imagine these are really big, like this. But what I don't know who suggested this, but if you make a decal, like if you take a ruler, get this a little bit wet and kind of tear the paper so this is loose, like when it's handmade, but like this kind of edge.
Yeah, that's...
Then the edges blend in together.
Yes.
And then you kind of lose the border. You get a little bit thicker at that, but yeah, I don't know. I haven't done too much of it, but I have done it.
We mostly make the larger sheets from smaller sheets, out of the vat.
At the paper making
Yeah.
stage.
After we have taken the water or felt, you remove the screen, and you can actually peel the wet pulp and hold it by its corners and lay it down. You can overlap 1/4 of an inch. Sometimes we've overlapped more, but you can touch that with MC. And you can hit it with a sponge and that seam disappears. If you're making a 2-layer, you make sure to offset the seams and do the same technique. Now I've seen Michael on the seams, maybe with a little mallet or something, a little like
A very, very stiff boar bristle brush straight down to make
Just-
everything knit.
You're trying to work the fibers in so that they do meld. But I've showed some of the people in previous class, the last paper making student actually wanted to make a 6-foot sheet, and he had designed a cherry tree in bloom. So the reverse side had brown for the trunk, but all of the outer paper was pinks and oranges and reds on a white background. And